My name's Simon Carter. I'm Technical Solutions Director at Pi AI, and today I'm going to be talking about transforming public services with AI-driven testing. Every delivery team, including here at Pi, want to launch services more quickly and improve quality. In government, however, we can't achieve that by trading away security, accessibility, accountability, or assurance. We just can't. So what today is about is how we can use AI sensibly and efficiently to increase the pace of delivery while maintaining and ideally strengthen the controls that the public services depend on. So the agenda for today. We've got a lot packed into the half hour, so hopefully you'll find it very interesting and engaging. We're going to start with the public sector testing and why it must change, and where the traditional delivery model that we've all been using for a long time does fall short these days. And then I'm going to introduce the idea of requirements-led engineering and how that changes the software delivery lifecycle a little bit. We will see some examples of agentic testing in action. How do we actually go about that at Pi? So we'll cover that later on. And then we're going to talk about the benefits that you can see from it, benefits that we've seen from it, but how to do that with the appropriate guardrails in place and, of course, security and compliance. So a little bit just about me and Pi AI for now. First of all, I'm Simon, as I said at the beginning. I'm Technical Solutions Director here at Pi. I've got over 17 years of national health and governance experience, as well as an extensive technical background in all stages of the software delivery lifecycle, or the SDLC, as you see it referred to on here. I'm very grateful to be able to do this session on behalf of my employer, Pi AI. Pi AI have been working with the public sector for a long time. You can see on the right-hand side just some of the people we've supported. The company itself is onshore, female-founded, and with over 10 years history. We're an independent consultancy, so we don't try and pigeonhole people into, you must use this product or that product. We generally want to help people to get to the best products and services for them. In the team itself, we have a lot of experience across the whole software delivery lifecycle. It isn't just me. It's something we've been living and breathing for years. And you'll see how we've been adapting to the change further on in this session. We are a trusted partner and what we like to call a critical friend to lots of organizations in the public and private sector. And because we've got so much experience in the public sector, we know how accountable you need to be for public money because it's all coming from the public purse. That said, we do have experience across other industries as well. These are just some of the people we've worked with over the last 10, 12 years. We've worked in finance, we've worked in media, we've worked in education, and all of these bring their different challenges. But the important thing is they bring challenges that help us to work with the government. They bring challenges that are similar to the challenges you will face. And it means we can bring some best practice and some outside knowledge into here. But why are we here and why are we even doing this session? First of all, we've had to transform ourselves. We've changed a lot significantly about our own delivery model around AI. And that doesn't just mean putting an AI tool in there and hoping for the best. We have gone through each step of our process and delivery lifecycle to see and assess what works and what doesn't work. And this is something we do every day, which is why we feel like we can share this with you. We've often seen what goes wrong. I touched on just an AI tool, and what we have seen through case studies and across people we have worked with and interacted with is that too often the tool just gets deployed. It's AI, it's fancy, it's shiny, everyone's happy, but the team still remain disconnected. Nothing's joined up. Security and compliance can sometimes be a bit of an afterthought. And when all of that happens, the shiny new AI tool never delivers the benefits that you thought it would in the first place. Although all of this is important throughout the whole life cycle, today we're talking about testing in particular. And the reason for that is because testing is a very strong test case for this, in that it has to be evidence-driven, it has to be repeatable, it has to be auditable. And that's where people do get a little bit nervous with AI. But we're not just talking about us. As I say, we've worked in public service for a long time. And these are just some metrics about the challenge that we know you face. For instance, nearly 30% of central government systems are still legacy systems. Some of these built 15, 20 years ago. And the cost of that, the actual cost, is up to 3 to 4 times more than running a modern system. You've got servers, you've got outdated technology, there is more training as well. But it also feeds into the testing. A couple of challenges around testing. First of all is accessibility testing. Always difficult. And there are tools out there, but the tools tend to only get you about 40% of the way there with that. And you still need to do manual testing. You still need to deploy screen reader testing, etc., etc. Because we're in the public sector, a lot of our solutions will be low code, things like Power Apps or Dynamics or Power Automate. When we're in that situation, that is great because it really does empower you. But what it also means is we're kind of at the behest of Microsoft, and when they want to release an update, there are mandatory twice yearly updates. We might not be ready for it, and it might come in, and suddenly we've got a lot of regression testing to do, and it is a real challenge. A lot of people on this call, and ourselves included, will have been using test automation for a while. But sometimes where that falls down is just that it can be difficult to keep all of your test scripts up to date. It can be difficult when something changes to go through and find which test scripts need to be kept up to date. So that's where it's stalled a little bit over time. But because of all of this, you see things like, and this is an extreme case, admittedly, but the Birmingham ERP project, which started off as a £90 million business case, but for one reason or another, boxes not checked, things not done in the right order, compliance not there, it sprawled and sprawled and sprawled to become 216 million, and now it's been shelved. So like I say, that's an extreme example, but it does show that when you have these challenges, that it can cause outsized problems as well. And these are just some of the challenges that we see, that you probably sat there nodding now thinking, yeah, this is what we have to do. Because it's public, you have to be accountable for every single pound you spend. If the National Audit Office come knocking and want to do an audit or apply a level of scrutiny, everything has to be explained. Assurance gates are there for very good reason, but it does feel like sometimes it can be a bit of a churn. For instance, you've got to do service assessments when you have alpha, beta, and then live. The spend controls, which goes back to what we're talking about with the National Audit Office. And every single gate you go through demands an evidence pack, and that isn't just a tick sheet. That is a pack of different documents. Believe me, we've been there. The sovereignty as well. One of the problems with AI that people are coming across, one of the questions, not problems necessarily, is where is my data? Quite often the data has to stay in your tenant, it has to stay in your system. Sometimes it can go out there, but it can't sit on a server in America somewhere because we had a chat with AI. So there is a real challenge there. Accessibility as well. In the private sector, people follow accessibility guidelines, of course, but it's an option. In the public sector, it's the law. So this is why we were talking about accessibility testing earlier on, and we'll talk about it again in just a second because it has to be done. The legacy systems, the numbers I talked about before, you can see there. But what we also get is sometimes skills walk out the door. It could be the skills of somebody who maintained that system for years. It's an old system. Nobody really knows how it works in the back end. It's got an old database. That person leaves the skills go out the door. So it can be a challenge to keep the skills in-house and keep going forward. So testing of solutions inherits all of those challenges, of course, but then it adds additional ones. We talked about the low-code estates, platforms you don't control. From a testing perspective, especially when you're trying to automate it, this is where the automated testing becomes a little bit brittle because you could have a test script that runs on Dynamics, something slightly changes or the selector isn't a constant or something like that, it can cause the test to fail. And that's where the frustration comes in. We've already talked about the updates being on the vendor's clock. It isn't just Microsoft, by the way. It could be many different suppliers, release updates that mean things have to be tested again. And it can mean that whole teams of QAs or BAs have to then sacrifice a week of work to then sit there and retest everything. We talked about accessibility, and there's more challenges though, because the GDS standards say we can't use things like JavaScript, which means that, again, you've got another avenue of automated testing, which is slightly blocked. Test data being citizen data, well, it just can't be. We can't test on production. You can't test, especially in an automated way, with personal identifiable information, of course. And every time you do the testing, every time you do the regression, you can't just say, yep, that all passed. It needs to be evidenced so that people can see throughout the chain that everything has been done properly and compliant, and most importantly, securely. So the old delivery model does cause issues in itself. The old delivery model, I say that this is the traditional model and one that many of us are still using today. And until last year, we were too. And what we have here is you start at the beginning. It could be a brand new solution. It could be a change to an existing solution. But you have the issue raised. It could be a bug fix, or you get the requirement raised. Then it's documented. Then it's developed. And at that point, and only then do we create the tests. And then after that, we do the testing. And maybe, and this is where I'm going to introduce the concept of business intent, maybe the intent has been lost. Because at each of these steps, we've got handoffs to different teams. We've got waiting times. There's limited visibility, as it says there, so you can't always see what's happening. Quite often the QA, the quality assurance, is only thought about after the build, and that's what I've said, that quite often that's when the tests are created, and it's not the fault of anybody. It's a situation of how can you build a test until you've seen something, and that's a situation in a traditional model. What that means, though, is you create the tests and the feedback arrives very late. You can see in this model right at the end of the chain. And if the feedback is found to be negative at that point, quite often we have to go all the way back to the beginning, and the same things happen, but what compounds is the same issues are still there. So teams are working hard at capacity, but what we've seen over the years, and what you've likely seen yourself, is there are issues with this model. But switching to a new model can be difficult. Change is difficult. It could be that there's no time to redesign delivery. We've got a tried and tested method. Okay, it's not perfect, but we do this all of the time. It might also be that automation feels risky or expensive. It can be hard to get buy-in sometimes, so people tend to do nothing in that case. Any change in the public sector requires lots of assurance, lots of approvals, all the way up at the chain, and constant stakeholder alignment. In security and compliance, especially when we talk about AI, that's very top of mind. And it can be felt that teams lack the specialist capacity to do that. But there is also a cost of not doing this. If you delay it, the time we could have spent redesigning delivery and getting the efficiencies further down the line and forevermore, that time is then spent on rework, bug fixes, firefighting, 2 a.m. calls because the system isn't up, somebody can't make a payment or something like that. Manual test and restrict coverage. By coverage, what we mean is how much of the solution can be tested. And realistically, unless you have the luxury of a huge QA team, that means that we have to test the critical paths, the happy paths. It means that we can end up with low coverage across the whole solution. It also means that releases slow down as well because we're doing manual testing. So something that could potentially be tested in a day ends up taking a week, maybe more, depending on the scale of change. Things like security, compliance, change management, etc. As you'll see in the new model, these are thought of all the way through, from the beginning all the way through. What you don't want to do is wait right till the end. Keep on putting it off because it becomes expensive later on. And those specialist capacities, well, some of that moves away. The QA and the BA, the developer, they could potentially all start to merge into one sort of role where you don't need to sit there and be specialized in writing test scripts necessarily. You could do more of the development. You can finally get through the backlog, and you spend more time working with the solution than you are doing testing. So the cost of the old loop, you can see there on the screen, that's our takeaway: outages, errors, and firefighting. Quite often, I've said all that, that's quite a bold statement, but quite often discovered by end users. So what do we do about it? Well, the delivery life cycle is changing. I appreciate there's a lot on the screen here. So what I'm going to do is talk you through this and then show you an example of how we use it at Pi. The intent is the start of everything. So you might be thinking, well, it always has been. But the intent can get lost. You've seen in the old process, you've got all of the different handoffs. You've got inconsistent documentation, and it can become like Chinese whispers, and the intent can get lost or distorted. And it's only when you get to the end, you realize the solution or the change isn't achieving what it was set out to achieve. So we start with the requirement, and the requirement is all about what is the business intent here? What are we trying to do? So you might create a user story on the back of that. So as an admin user, I should be able to do X, Y, Z. You can see testing and testing planning, we've moved earlier in the chain. There's two flavors of this. First of all, testing as we go throughout this process can be as simple as testing, is the intent still being followed? Is everything we're doing going back to that original user story? It's also there to be able to plan the tests for any code that you're going to do, and also test for the end solution. So you may be thinking, well, how can we write a test for the end solution when it doesn't exist yet? Well, that's where the strong requirements come in. With the requirements being good enough, the planning as well, things like wireframes, this should all be enough for you to be able to write tests way before it needs to be tested. If you do work in a coding environment, there are tools to help you test the code as you go through. Test-driven development is a way of approaching that too. But also when you get to the end user testing, it means you're already planned and you're ready to go, and it's all tied back to the intent. By moving that earlier and keeping it in mind all the way through, whether you're using AI, as you'll see in a second, like an AI agent to do part of this, or whether the human is doing it, at each point you've got a checkpoint, and it always goes back to, are we solving the problem that was there at the beginning? As you go through the deployment, we adapt, and this is part of the agile methodology. Of course, things can change. We need our solution to be efficient. We need it to be repeatable. We need it to be compliant, and we need it to be safe. This is what this is about. So, at every stage of this, you can get AI assistance. I'm going to talk about a few things as we go through. This, of course, genuinely speeds things up, and you may be thinking, well, yeah, what if it makes things up? And that's why we're going to talk strongly about the requirement and why is it as important for dev and business analysis as it is for QA during the process. Human oversight is a huge point of this. The human in the loop is what you may have heard before. And this is an example of how we use it. So one of the things we wanted to do is improve the way we do user interface testing. So the normal approach, the traditional approach, is you have the solution there, you sit down, you've got a test script in Excel or something like that, tick, 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 tick as we go through. And it's great. And it often works very well. But what you don't get is a hard evidence pack. You do get the evidence that the scripts all pass, which is great, but you don't get things like screenshots. You don't get like traces of what actually happened in the system. Was everything working from a code perspective as well? So we have a system that we developed and we use internally, and called Helix. And what Helix does is, well, this is part of it. So we start with the user story, and it evaluates a requirement. I'm going to show you how in just a second. Then it comes up with a test approach. And at this point, this is Helix saying, this is how we think you would test this. So that was the stage I was talking about before, the test planning. At this point, we've got a human decision gate here because it's told us what it's planning to do. At this point, it may have got it wrong, and it may have got it wrong because of the tool. It may have got it wrong because the user story wasn't clear enough. Either way, at this point, we've got the human to say yes or no and go for it. The planner that you can see there on step 4 is an agentic planner. An agentic means it can act on its own. What this does is it visits a solution, it clicks, it types, it scrolls, and throughout it makes notes of every single thing that it's doing. Because at the next stage, we have another human stage gate, which is review the plan. Now, this is written in JSON, and if you've not heard of JSON before, I will show you an example of it later on, and it's not intimidating. It is code, but it's very easy to understand. If we're happy with that, this is when AI steps out of the loop. Because although AI can assist all the way through, when there are times when it's deterministic, and by that we mean it's the same every single time, and it's easy to understand, so writing scripts, for instance. So we have our plan that's in JSON, we're happy with it, we sign it off, and then the test writer generates what we call a playwright test. It's an automated testing framework. When it does the testing, as I say, there's no AI in this case because it's just a script that runs and runs and runs and runs. It collects evidence. We've got evidence at the end of the process there, but actually it does happen all the way through. Think about the test approach on step 2. We've seen that. There's evidence of that. We've signed it off. There's evidence of that. We see what the planner's doing. We get the review. So all the way through, we're getting evidence and evidence and evidence. And we also have the human evidence review as well. So what does that look like in practice? Well, requirements-led engineering means that quality moves upstream. It means that we're not waiting till the end to do our quality assurance. We're not even doing it in the middle, which is where some teams do before it moves from code into UI. We're doing it all the way through, right from the beginning. So the business intent is translated into testable outcomes. The acceptance criteria is evaluated, and I'll show you that in just a second, before any work even begins. And then you have all the evidence that traces back to this. So you can see a couple of examples of the Helix evaluator in action over on the right-hand side there. What it's doing is it's looking at clarity. So is this story clear? Do I understand it? Specificity. Is it giving me enough information so that when we do a test and we do a plan, it knows what to do? So for example, click this drop down, this should happen, this should happen. That's a very specific story, and that's a good story. And is it consistent, or does it wander throughout? So the intent at the beginning, are we still talking about art all the way through the story? With a bad story, is the second one there, it may be it's been quite hand wavy and said, okay, just add a contact or something like that, or check that the page loads or something. So it's not very specific. And this is where you get your feedback. You can see on here it says reasons over on the right hand side. This is where the evaluation process is an excellent example of humans and AI working together. We've written our story. It understands all of the context because there's an SME there. And it then helps us. It gives us suggestions. This is how you could make it better. This is why I'm struggling with specificity. And then you could go through this process again. And imagine the difference now between going through this process now, before anything's even been built, rather than at the end and saying, well, the requirements weren't clear when something's been built that isn't spec. How that would look in practice is, imagine those green steps there as the human in the loop that we talked about before. Well, very quickly on this screen, before I show you more about Helix, is that we write the story, the agent interprets the story, tells us what it's going to do, the test runs the test, and things are great. You could run the test over and over and over again. That's the idea behind scripted testing. So when it does come to Microsoft dropping that twice yearly update, and you need to do all your regression tests, they're there. Click of a button, off it can go. Now, sometimes tests may fail. The reason could be that something's actually broken, in which case we need to know about it. Or it could be that your button used to say save and now it says submit. If you think about that, the intent is still the same. Somebody needs to submit or save a form. So what happens in Helix is that it goes back to that original story. If the story hasn't changed, it will go through the process again, autonomously or semi-autonomously, it's up to you. And it will try. It will give the plan, it will go to the solution. And because the intent is we need to submit the form, it will see that it said save, now it says submit, it will update the test, run the test. If everything works, then brilliant. If it doesn't, then you know you've got a genuine defect. So it stops that panic of, oh, there's a bug, everything stopped working. The core of this is the user story. So with this, in Helix, there's a library of the different stories. You can review them in here, but there will be a single source of truth. It could be Azure DevOps, it could be Jira, but it's a single source of truth. And this is, you can see here, this is what the evaluator is judging on. So we've got a user story, we've got acceptance criteria. This is quite a good one, and it would score quite highly. Once we've approved this and gone through the necessary stage gates, we move on to the agentic planning side of things. Now, we have done this for government people and public sector. Obviously, we can't show actual solutions. So we've decided here to show you Helix running against the Ocado website because everybody can see that. You can see it's quite valid. It's getting excited for the football. But what's happening here is over on the left-hand side, Helix is telling us what it's doing. If it's finding any problems, if something isn't working, it's telling us all the way through. And on the right-hand side, it's giving us evidence. It's showing us what it can see. And all the way through, you're getting screenshots, screenshot, that's your evidence. And if you think there's a difference between this and a human tester, first of all, you can leave this running and you'll get the output at the end. But second of all, unless specifically asked, the human tester is very unlikely to take screenshots at every single stage and have that as an evidence pack. The great thing is it does this anyway. You may not need it, but if you do, it's there and it's done. We've talked about this already. This is the JSON that I talked about before. And if you haven't seen it and never heard of it before, hopefully you're looking at that code now and saying, okay, I understand that. Navigate to the train line, click accept all cookies, wait for a second, click the one-way button, etc., etc. So this is what we've tried to do with the solution. What all AI solutions should do is make it as easy as possible for humans to know what's going on. So they're not just blindly clicking accept. Then on the back of that, we get our scripted tests. So this is a type of script called Playwright, as I talked about before. This gets generated automatically by Helix once you've approved the plan. That deterministic that I was talking about before, we can get JSON directly into Playwright. And what that means is we have automated testing. Now, you could have hundreds of these tests because you're able to increase your coverage. You're able to do more autonomously. But what that means is you get this experience here. It's running the tests, it's making sure everything's okay, it's passed. But again, you have evidence all the way through. We see ourselves as customer one for this, and these are some of the benefits we're seeing. So we're seeing feedback much earlier. And that could be feedback from bugs, but it could also be feedback of, okay, this has drifted a little bit from the intent, but we're getting that right at the beginning. Everything is going 3 to 5 times faster. You may be sat here thinking, okay, well, if I have to do the first thing and then check it, AI does the second thing and I check it, etc., etc. How am I saving any time? But what we talk about is moving through time when you have more confidence to be able to let some things go. You're happy with the plans 90% of the time, it gets the plan right. Maybe let it run on to the planning stage, agentic stage. What it also means is, though, you're not actually sitting there doing the testing, writing the scripts, etc. So you could be working on other parts of your job. There's much less test maintenance because the tests are written in such a way to be flexible on things like dynamics. But also, we talked about before the self-healing loop, where it can go back and fix itself if the intent and the story are the same, but there's been a slight change in the UI. And talking about those evidence packs, much, much faster. I think 80% there is possibly even conservative because it creates all of this. It puts them all in a place we want them to be, and we can evidence the results of the testing. Of course, you need to have guardrails, and that's a human in the loop. What you could do with Helix and what you should be able to do with all AI systems is turn the autonomy up and down. So when you've got a regression release, for instance, you may turn the autonomy way up because you've had the regression test before. You know it's happy, so you're happy for it just to run that on a loop and just let you know if something's wrong. When it's a brand new release or when you're new with the system, you may turn the autonomy down, which means there's more human gates. When the requirements are fresh, they've been evaluated up front, you want to check at every stage that you're happy with it until you get more and more confidence in the tools. And that confidence can be done by thinking about the security and the grounding. By grounding, we mean it's grounded in approved sources. So it can only use the artifacts. It can only look at things that you want it to do. Controlled access, just like with a human in this case, you shouldn't provide it with huge levels of security permissions just because it's a tool that's going to go across your system. You should give it the same privileges as the user you're testing for would have. So it can't just go off and do what it wants or go to the admin center. Guardrails at every stage. So the rules are saying, this is what I want you to do. This is what I want you to generate. This is when human approval is required. And that means everything is traceable and accountable. So we can turn the autonomy up and down, but what can never, ever change is the level of security. I've noticed we brought this in almost right on time. I hope you found the discussion today useful and engaging and giving you food for thought. If you wonder about what the next steps are, if you put any questions in the chat, we will come back to you shortly with that. But as a consultancy, we also offer agentic consulting services and support across the full STLC. As you've seen, we've done it ourselves. We're living and breathing this. The product Helix, which I talked about briefly during this, the testing solution, it is going to be on the G-Cloud frameworks and Microsoft Marketplace in September. But the product is up and running. So if you'd like a POC or maybe a free trial, please get in touch. And we have a lot of accelerators across the whole STLC. As I said, today was about testing, but we have accelerators that can write functional specs. It can write some help writing with user stories. It can help determine what permissions different solutions need, etc. So if you're interested in any of that, please come and speak to us. And lastly, there's a lot to digest here. So it may be that in the next few days or weeks, you think of some questions on the back of this. Please do email us. You can see we've got the address at the bottom there, piaisolutions.com, and you can email us at info@piaisolutions.com. Thank you, everybody, for giving up part of your lunchtime today. I hope, again, that you found it interesting. I'm grateful that you all joined, and I will hopefully speak to some, if not all of you, very soon.